Black 13-year-old garage prodigy. Unmasks millions auto conspiracy. Boss busted live on camera. He stood there in his tailored suit arms, crossed, sneering down at her, just a kid. 13 years old hands greasy standing beside that locked-down supercar that had defeated every master technician in the city. Let's see if she can do what we couldn't. He barked, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. In that instant, the entire workshop fell silent. Mechanics dared not breathe. They thought it was a cruel joke, a child up against impossible machinery. But she wasn't intimidated. In her eyes burned the confidence of someone who already knew the answer everyone claimed didn't exist. Before we plunge into this battle of wits, hit subscribe and slam that like button, because you're about to witness a 13-year-old genius take on the city's most powerful auto tycoon. Stick around, you won't believe the moment she flips the script and shatters every expectation. Ava stepped off the school bus and crossed the cracked asphalt lot of Sam's auto shop, her backpack slung over one shoulder, a wrench tucked into the back pocket of her jeans. At 13, she already knew the rhythm of engines better than most adults knew their morning coffee routine. Every afternoon for the past year, she'd raced here straight from class, eager to lend a hand to her father, a master mechanic whose hands, thickened by decades of grease and muscle, taught her everything he could, yet never suspected she would outpace him one day. Sam Turner wiped his oily hands on a rag as Ava ducked under the open hood of a late-model Camry. He trusted her implicitly. She'd swapped out spark plugs, tracked down vacuum leaks, and traced wiring gremlins that had stumped seasoned techs. But he also worried that her curiosity might get her into trouble, that the world beyond this garage wasn't always kind to a black girl with grease-stained fingers. Word had spread around town that Carter Industries, the city's dominant auto service chain, was sending a surprise audit team today. Mr. Richard Carter himself, a lean man in custom-tailored suits who ran his empire with an iron fist, had never taken Sam's little neighborhood shop seriously. Rumor said he planned to shutter any independent garage he deemed substandard, consolidating every repair contract under his own banner. The bell above the door jingled. Ava straightened and saw Carter stride in polished shoes, clicking clipboard in hand. His sharp gaze swept over the dusty floor, the rows of dented toolboxes, and the myriad of half-disassembled engines. Mechanics froze, mid-pull wrenches hovering over manifolds. They all knew this inspection could mean the end of the only home they'd ever known. Afternoon, Carter said, voice cool as a metal lathe. He didn't acknowledge Sam or any of the men and women who'd worked here for years. His eyes locked on Ava, crouched by the engine block forehead, smeared with grease. "What do we have here?" he asked, tone deliberately patronizing. Sam cleared his throat. "This is my daughter Ava. She's—" Before he could finish, Carter cut in. "Your daughter? In my workshop, I assume she's on a school field trip." A smirk curled at the corner of his mouth. The mechanics exchanged uneasy glances. Carter's sneer made it clear he thought a child had no business touching their precious machinery. Ava straightened, hissed out the tension in her chest, and met Carter's gaze without flinching. She had learned early on that her knowledge was her shield. When she was 8, she'd rebuilt a broken radio from spare parts her father tossed aside. 2 years ago, she'd reverse-engineered a faulty brake sensor module no veteran tech could diagnose. Those victories were private until today. Carter turned away and strode toward a sleek, matte black prototype car perched on the lifts at the back of the shop. Its complex fusion engine had been delivered 3 days ago. This, he said, lifting a panel to reveal an intricate maze of wiring and sensors, is the so-called future of performance vehicles. My engineers at Carter couldn't get it running. My best technicians have been here non-stop and still nothing. He tapped the exposed circuitry. So tell me, Mr. Turner, how does a community garage like yours stay open when you can't even service a model that every other shop in the city has given up on? A hush fell over the room. The mechanic shifted, glancing at Sam, and then at Ava, as if waiting for her to bolt. But Ava didn't move. She took a steady breath, feeling that familiar spark of excitement. Every challenge, every impossible problem she'd ever faced, she'd prepared for moments like this. Carter's gaze returned to her. "You," he said, nodding once toward Ava. You look like you've been in here long enough to know your way around. Why don't you give it a try? Sam's hand shot out to stop her, but Ava met Carter's gaze head-on. In that instant, she felt the weight of every doubt they'd ever cast on her. Her age, her appearance, the unspoken assumption that a black girl couldn't master high-tech engineering. Yet she also felt the surge of every late-night study session in her father's cramped office, every YouTube tutorial she'd dissected, every schematic she'd translated on her phone. "I'll need a computer," she said, voice calm. "And about 15 minutes." Carter laughed, a low, dismissive sound that bounced off the concrete walls. 15 minutes? I've given my top engineers 3 days. Ava simply nodded. As she reached for her backpack to pull out a compact laptop, the mechanics watched in stunned silence. The gallery of doubtful eyes fell on her, but she wasn't the least bit intimidated. Because for Ava Turner, nothing was impossible, especially when everyone else had already decided she was. The moment Carter laid out the challenge, the air in the garage shifted from tension to outright hostility. He jabbed a finger at the gleaming prototype's exposed wiring harness. "You see this?" he snarled. "My top engineers have torn this thing apart for days. I'm willing to bet everything on a 13-year-old who probably still needs help reading a wiring diagram." Laughter rippled through the bays, rough, bitter laughter from men who felt betrayed that their decades of experience might be rendered irrelevant by a child. Ava swallowed, her pulse hammering in her ears, but she refused to flinch. Around her, Sam's veteran crew, Tony with his grease-gouged overalls and 2 decades of service, Maria, the diagnostic specialist who prided herself on never missing an intermittent fault, exchanged uneasy glances. Even Jake, the confident new hire, who'd never known a world without digital ECU mapping, looked uncertain. Carter had insulted them as thoroughly as Ava. They clustered behind her as she crouched by the engine toolkit in hand. At first glance, it seemed like ritual check, spark check, fuel pressure check, ground connections. But Ava moved methodically, tracing patterns through the wiring harness, her mind recalling obscure details from aftermarket service bulletins, forum posts she'd scoured at night, the subtlest clues from waveform traces she'd paused at in tutorial videos. 20 minutes in, Tony cleared his throat. "I've been looking at that ignition coil cluster for years. Never once saw you tapping the camshaft position sensor like that." He leaned closer as Ava paused, finger on a tiny black junction box. Carter's eyes flicked over her shoulder, contempt, giving way to curiosity, an expression no one had seen on his face before. A quick diagnostic check lit up Ava's laptop screen. "The ECU isn't just refusing to fire the fuel pump," she explained, voice steady. "It's waiting for an encrypted handshake that never comes, like a digital signature mismatch." Carter scoffed. "That's tech support mumbo-jumbo. Show me the real problem." Ava connected her laptop to the onboard port and ran a custom script she'd written the night before. Lines of code scrolled past as Carter's brow furrowed. The workshop fell silent, except for the tapping of mechanical keys and the distant drone of idling engines. After a flood of diagnostic logs, Ava pointed to a time-stamped entry. "See this 90 days after first ignition, the firmware auto-locks the ECU to prevent unauthorized access. Then it goes into permanent limp mode." Maria gasped. "That's a theft deterrent feature from next-gen European imports. Why would they use it here?" Ava shook her head. "They wouldn't unless someone deliberately programmed it that way." Her tone was flat, almost weary. Carter's swagger wavered. Now Ava pivoted to the next phase, reprogramming. "I need to override the bootloader, patch the firmware, and reset the signature table. It's not complicated if you know where to look." She closed her eyes, briefly recalling hours spent reverse engineering encrypted firmware dumps in her father's dusty office. Then her fingers flew across the keyboard, deploying a small payload that bypassed the lockout routine. The garage lights flickered. Every pair of eyes tracked the progress bar. Finally, the screen confirmed success. Ava cut the power, coaxed the engine to life, and the Porsche roared, echoing like a thunderclap off the concrete walls. Carter snapped his clipboard shut, staring as the car idled smoothly for the first time. In the hushed aftermath, the mechanics edged forward, disbelief etched on their faces. Tony whispered, "I'd pay a year's salary to see how you just did that." Jake swallowed hard. Maria's stance softened into awe. Carter's jaw hung open. The insurance policy he'd placed on this shop's closure shattered. Ava glanced over her shoulder at her father. Sam's eyes glistened with pride, gratitude, and relief that his daughter had proven what he'd always believed, and pride that she'd done it on her own terms. Around them, the crew erupted into applause so thunderous it rattled the floor plates. And Carter, for the first time, saw her not as a child, but as the engineer who'd just beaten his best at their own game. Now Ava stepped back from the car and spoke with quiet authority. "Here's how we turn the tables," she began, voice steady. Mechanics leaned in. "First, I'll need full access to the shop's diagnostic terminal and our secure network. I'm going to extract every firmware dump from the past 6 months, every ECU signature, every error log. We'll map out the pattern of those automatic lockouts." She paused, eyes flicking to Carter's clipboard. "Then I'll cross-reference that with repair tickets from partner shops. I already have a list of serial numbers. We're going to prove these failures were baked in at the factory, not because of wear or misuse." Sam hesitated, but Tony cut in. "If she gets network access, we're covered." Carter's smirk faltered as Ava continued. "Once I isolate the sabotage code, I'll prepare a patch that not only restarts this engine, but overrides the kill switch across all affected vehicles. We'll broadcast every step live so there's no hiding." A murmur ran through the crew. Maria's diagnostic rig hummed to life at Ava's command. Jake set up a camera feed pointed at the laptop screen. The air crackled with energy. Carter's eyes narrowed. He realized this was more than a repair job. "I've already written the exploit," Ava said, tapping her temple. "I learned from the aftermarket security forums, and yes, I tested it here last night. In 15 minutes, I can expose the entire scheme, firmware contracts, even internal emails." She met Carter's gaze. "Your move." Silence, then a single defiant nod from Tony. As Ava's fingers flew across the keyboard, the workshop held its breath, teetering on the edge of revelation and ruin. Now Ava's fingers danced over her laptop keys as she initiated the exploit. First, she tapped into the shop's diagnostic server and began streaming every packet of data straight to the overhead monitors. Mechanics around her watched in disbelief as lines of firmware dumps scrolled past every ECU signature, every error log from the last 6 months. "This isn't just a one-off glitch," she said, voice low but clear. "It's a coordinated failure sequence baked into the assembly line." On the main screen, a timeline appeared, 17 Porsche prototypes, each showing the exact same pattern engine lockouts activating 90 days after first ignition. Ava clicked again, revealing internal repair invoices from partner garages. "See here," she explained, highlighting a column of tiny profit margins. "Each car gets diagnosed as irreparable, then sold back to the manufacturer at a fraction of its value." Gasps broke out. Tony rubbed his eyes. Maria pressed a hand to her mouth. Even Carter stiffened, jaw clenched. But Ava wasn't finished. She opened a second window to display scanned email threads, messages between Carter Industries executives and Sam's auto shop management. Subject lines like quarterly return scheme and bonus allocation, defective buybacks. Ava scrolled until the key message appeared, commission paid on each unrepairable unit, 15%. He knew Sam muttered under his breath. Ava nodded. He not only knew, he orchestrated it. She paused, letting the weight of the betrayal sink in. Then she pressed a single key. The live stream went public. Instantly, viewer count skyrocketed into the thousands. Comments flooded in. "This is fraud. Call the FBI. I was charged $4,000 for a total loss." Ava turned back to the code. "Next," she said, her tone sharpened. "We neutralized the sabotage. I'm uploading a firmware patch now." She hit enter. The patch propagated through the shop's network to every connected ECU. A progress bar ticked toward completion, and with each increment, tension mounted. Carter's face drained of color. The shop's lighting flickered as systems rebooted. At 100%, Ava cut power to the prototype. Then, with a firm nod, she keyed the ignition. Silence hung for a heartbeat. Then the engine roared to life, potent, unchoked, unleashing the full power its designers had hidden. The sound reverberated like thunder. Carter took an involuntary step back. Mechanics erupted in cheers, some tearing up, others hugging. Maria laughed in relief. Jake pumped his fist. Tony slapped Carter's clipboard out of his hand. Even Sam's eyes glistened as he hugged his daughter. Ava allowed herself a small smile, victory tinged with vindication. But she wasn't done. Pulling up another interface, she initiated a live data dump to a national regulator's server, sending every byte of evidence straight to law enforcement and consumer protection agencies. "I'm not just proving a point," she announced. "I'm broadcasting this so the entire industry sees it. No more hidden defects, no more silenced victims." On the monitors, official seals of government agencies appeared confirming receipt of the data. Carter's phone buzzed relentlessly, alerts from stock exchanges, media outlets, and legal notifications. His empire was collapsing in real time. Ava closed her laptop. "That's the patch, the proof, and the public record," she said. The workshop floor thundered with applause and disbelief. Carter, pale and trembling, could only stare. Finally, he muttered, "How? How could a kid do all this?" Ava met his gaze unflinchingly. "Because while you were busy underestimating me, I was preparing." She gestured to her laptop. "I studied the schematics you'd hidden from your own technicians. I reverse-engineered your lockout routine. I infiltrated your communications. And I chose this moment when you humiliated me to expose everything." Around her, the mechanics rallied. Tony picked up Carter's dropped clipboard and slapped it against his palm. "You left us in the dark for years," he said. "She just turned the lights on." Jake and Maria stood beside Ava, forming a united front. A siren wailed in the distance, local authorities responding to the regulator's tip-off. Carter swallowed hard, gaze darting between the screens and the assembled crowd. He took a shaky breath and stepped forward. He began, but his voice cracked. The mechanics muttered among themselves, unwilling to grant him any words. Ava raised a hand. "It ends here." She pressed one last command. The livestream cut to footage of Carter's own admissions, time-stamped and watermarked. "Everyone," she said, voice amplified through the shop's speakers. "This is what happens when you treat people like they're disposable. When you bet your money on their failure because of their age, their race, or their station." Silence followed a silence heavy with justice served. Then the workshop's door swung open as police officers filed in, evidence in hand. Carter's shoulders slumped. He raised his hands, defeated. Ava turned to the crowd, eyes shining. "We did it," she said softly. "Not just for my dad's shop, but for every garage, every driver, every person who's been told they're not smart enough or strong enough." She stepped back, letting the moment resonate. The prototype idled behind her, a testament to reclaimed power. And in that charged stillness, every mechanic, every witness, every viewer online knew they had just witnessed the reckoning, a 13-year-old girl's methodical, merciless, and utterly brilliant revenge. The moment the police marched Carter out in handcuffs, the workshop erupted. Mechanics cheered and hugged each other, eyes shining with relief and vindication. Sam Turner sank to his knees, wiping tears as he watched the man who nearly destroyed his life led away. For years they'd toiled under impossible failures, now their skill was undeniable. News vans swarmed the garage within hours. Reporters jockeyed for a word with Ava as she stood beside her father, both framed by that roaring supercar, now unchained from its digital prison. "I couldn't be prouder," Sam told cameras, voice cracking. "My daughter didn't just fix an engine, she fixed our faith in what's possible." By sunset, Carter Industries stock had plummeted, investors fleeing as regulatory bodies opened formal fraud investigations. Headlines blared, "Teen mechanic cracks, corporate conspiracy, and how a 13-year-old toppled an automotive empire." Social media exploded with clips of Ava's live broadcast, millions of views pouring in overnight. Within 24 hours, Ava received a call from Electra Motors, a leading electric vehicle innovator. They offered her an internship with full funding, amazed by her mastery of encrypted firmware. A week later, Tesla's VP of Engineering flew in to extend a $1.5 million research grant for her real-time diagnostics platform. She graciously declined until her community garage was fully rebuilt and a scholarship fund for underrepresented youth was secured. Back at Tech and Daughter Garage, formerly Sam's Auto Shop, the transformation was immediate. New diagnostic bays, advanced computer terminals, and a mentorship program sprung up around Ava and her team. Tony declared it the greatest workshop in America, while Jake proudly led training sessions for local teens. Maria launched a podcast on automotive ethics, using their story to warn of hidden sabotage in other industries. Meanwhile, Carter faced federal charges that carried hefty fines and potential prison time. His wife filed for divorce, seizing the remnants of his fortune. His empire of 47 service centers was auctioned off to compensate defrauded customers. He watched it all unfold on late-night news, realizing that underestimating a child had been his undoing. As Ava accepted a community award for Young Innovator of the Year, she spoke directly to everyone who ever felt dismissed. When someone says, "You can't," you prove you can, and then you change the game. The crowd rose, applauding a girl who turned prejudice into power, who taught an entire industry that real strength comes from curiosity, courage, and refusing to be silenced. In that moment, Ava Turner wasn't just a mechanic's daughter, she was the spark that ignited a revolution. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a broken engine or a vindictive boss, it was a lesson in the hidden power of underestimated voices. Ava's journey shows us that expertise doesn't always come with age or a polished resume, but with relentless curiosity and the courage to dig deeper than anyone expects. When she tapped into encrypted firmware and proprietary emails, she exposed a conspiracy built on profit prejudice and protectionism, reminding us that real innovation thrives in transparency, not in lockdown silos. We also learned that underestimating someone based on skin color, youth, or background is more than unfair, it's foolish. Harrison's arrogance blinded him to the very skills he thought he owned. By viewing Ava as a child first, he missed her intelligence, resourcefulness, and the months of quiet preparation she'd invested. In business, as in life, mistaking power for competence invites disaster. A second lesson lies in the ethics of technology. Modern vehicles rely on software as much as metal, and with that comes a responsibility not to weaponize code for gain. Ava revealed how hidden kill switches and back-channel buyback schemes preyed on both mechanics and drivers. Her reversal of that sabotage, turning proprietary locks into open-source patches, underscores the necessity of ethical design and open auditing in every industry that wields digital control. Finally, her story teaches us about the true nature of revenge and justice. Ava didn't merely break the boss's scheme. She built something better in its place, reconstructing her father's shop into a community hub, sharing her knowledge and ensuring no one else would suffer the same betrayal. That transformation from destruction to reconstruction is the highest form of retribution, proving that the most powerful response to injustice is creation. So whenever you're doubted, remember your most underestimated self may be your greatest asset. Knowledge born of curiosity, shaped by perseverance, and guided by integrity, can topple empires and rewrite the rules. And in that shift from victim to architect of change, you'll discover that the fiercest power belongs not to those with the loudest voices, but to those with the clearest vision. And that's how a 13-year-old garage prodigy rewrote the rules of an entire industry. From grease-stained fingers to courtroom-worthy evidence, Ava Turner transformed prejudice into power, proving that true strength comes from relentless curiosity and unwavering integrity. If this story inspired you, hit like and share it with someone who's ever been underestimated. Drop a comment below. What's your own impossible challenge waiting to be conquered? Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a moment when ordinary people shatter expectations and ignite change. Up next, we'll dive into the astonishing tale of the 12-year-old coder who hacked a Fortune 500 company's security while everyone thought she was just playing video games. You won't believe how she turned pixels into profit and exposed corruption at the highest level. Stay curious, stay courageous, and remember, the biggest mistakes come from underestimating the quiet ones. I'll see you in the next video.